Life hacks, leadership tips, stories, and fun. It's time for Two Guys on Stuff with Michael Edwards and Tom Tobin. They're executives, entrepreneurs, and great friends. And this is a conversation about values-based, purpose-driven leadership that can transform you, your organization, and the world. Now, let's hear what stuff the guys are talking about this week.
Welcome to Two Guys on Stuff. I am Michael Edwards, and I'm joined with my good friend and co-host, Tom Tobin. Tom, how are you?
Wonderful, man. I mean, let's face it, Christmas, a couple days away. We are stoked, so excited to have our grandchildren, our kids here. You know, oftentimes people say, well, do you forget about your kids when you have your grandchildren? And the reality of it is you kind of, but no, we love having our family in our home. It is just the best time. And we have a great time together. So yeah, we're excited. We're excited. What about you guys?
Same. We'll have a house full of kiddos and mother and all kinds of good things going on. So what is a Tobin family tradition at Christmas time?
Oh, Christmas Eve. That has been our family tradition since Sherry and I got married. We'll be married 35 years. That's the other thing. We got our 35th anniversary coming up on the 29th of December. But our tradition is Friday night, we all go out together for dinner, meaning us, our kids, now our grandkids, and my wife's parents, my mother and father-in-law, and her sister and brother-in-law, their kids. So we all go out to dinner together, go out to a nice dinner. Now, that has changed over time in terms of where we're going, but we typically are consistent in where we go. And then we go home and we all change real quick. And then we go meet at her parents' house, open presents, enjoy our evening together. And now with the little ones, it gets later and later every year. And then we are done for Christmas Eve. Then we go home, get a good night's sleep if we can, get up in the morning, and then we all go back over to her parents' house and just have a lazy day. And a couple years ago, we started having like soup of the day. So everybody brings a soup. So we all have different soups and we play games together as a family. It's all about family, and the presents are great, but it truly is, it is the best thing that we can do. And our children have said, we want to continue this and we want our grandchildren growing up with this. So now our grandchildren are with their great grandparents and with their grandparents. And so, yeah, it's fantastic. So that's a good question. What about you guys? Got a family tradition?
Yeah, so we do. And first, I have to say, I am so lucky to have an amazing wife who puts all this stuff together. I'm just grateful.
Mm-hmm.
Christmas Eve. So, we go to the Christmas Eve service, and then
Yep.
Christmas Eve, we all get to pick like an appetizer, and Sherry prepares everybody's list of appetizers, and the selections are just, they vary. I always usually get something crazy, and then we give the kids the option to open one present on Christmas Eve, or they can choose to open all of them on Christmas Day. And what's interesting is the kids get older, they don't really care about opening a present on Christmas Eve. They're ready to go on Christmas Day. So Christmas Day, we get up, we open presents, we do stockings, because Santa came. And
Yes.
then Sherry gets cracking on cooking just some amazing food. And there's two things that I'm responsible for. One of them everybody likes, and one of them I like. But they're Edwards family traditions. We do a prime rib, and we do Yorkshire pudding, which are traditional English dish. My family is English, and in fact, my dad, he started this tradition. When I was a little kid. He probably started it before, but I remember it when I was a little kid. And he's got this Graham Kerr cookbook. And if you remember Graham Kerr, he's a British chef. And so this Graham Kerr cookbook was probably written in the early 70s, and I still have it. And while I don't use it to cook the prime rib, I do use it to cook the Yorkshire pudding because I do it only one day a year. And then my other thing that Sherry does for me every year is a pear pie. She makes the most amazing pies, and this pear pie is it's phenomenal. So we eat and we take our little Christmas Day naps.
Yes, my diabetes has definitely suffered at the hands of her great
Yeah, she's
baking.
quite a baker.
Tell her I want jalapeno poppers. That's my appetizer next time.
Okay, cool. She's good at that.
All right.
Awesome. Hey, so really excited. In the last episode, we talked about practice what we preach, and we talked through Jobly Go and all of the different things that I've done to bring that business and product to life. And on today's episode, we are going to talk about Tom's journey with the new venture. And it's important to know that, I said it on several episodes, Tom's horrible at retiring, and he's a serial entrepreneur. And we talked a little bit about this on the first episode, but I want to talk about, who you do life with, who you do business with is important. And I want to share with the audience that, it's important to know our relationship, Tom and I. Tom, you're not just a co-host. We talked about it before. You're my 2 a.m. phone call. You're my counselor and someone I trust with decisions that affect my family. So, how did that kind of trust get built over 7 years?
I think that one of the most important, trust is the number one factor for me. If you ask my children, what is one thing that your dad hammered into your head? And it was trust. I said, if people don't trust you, or if you can't be trustworthy, then you don't have relationships. You don't have personal relationships. You don't have business relationships. And I said, trust is something that you get 100% up front, and then you chip away at it and you lose it over time, because it's the things that you say, it's the things that you do that make you untrustworthy. And I said, and it's very difficult to build back up. So I think for us, I think what it's been is, and correct me if I'm wrong or if you think differently, but it's just been ongoing conversations, life activities, phone calls that we've had, even difficult conversations. We call it iron sharpening iron. We're both believers. And so we look at biblical references where we lift each other up. I look at you as my Aaron. Sometimes I can't hold my arms up, and you've been there to encourage me and to help me physically hold myself up. And we've gone through really difficult times together. And, being in the military myself and thinking about kind of that foxhole mentality, nobody knows you like your brother in a foxhole. And we've gone through family members passing away. I think that's the thing is that people don't take the time to build relationships like they used to. And we don't take the time to get to know each other. And when the going gets tough, they leave. And so thank you for the question. I think as I go into 2026, it's important for me personally, but I do think it's important for everyone to stop and consider, who is it that I'm doing life with? Do they lift me up? Do I walk away from a conversation with them or a moment with them or an hour with them? Do I walk away feeling energized? And that's how I've felt like in our relationship. So hopefully that answers the question. I don't think you'll disagree with anything, but
No, not at all. In fact, one of the things you mentioned, that our relationship differs from many of the other relationships I have, is we hold each other accountable. And accountable to a lot of things. We've had hey, Michael, you're screwing up, or hey, Michael, you need to do this a little bit differently. And I think that's an important aspect of our relationship. And, I've said it time and time again, you become whom you surround yourself with. And I think that that's important to make sure you surround yourself with people that are aligned with your values and are or on the journey to become who you want to become.
And that's an important point too, because entrepreneurs, you might think that this is just Michael and I talking about something that sounds really great for us. But if you're an entrepreneur, you need to surround yourself with people that they're not just yes men or yes people,
right?
Politically correct, right? So they're not just going to say yes, but you've got this great idea. You want people that challenge you and challenge your ideas. In our last episode, Michael was talking about having to take some very important constructive criticism in his Jobly Go application, and was making changes on the fly. I think if you're an entrepreneur and you're beginning a process of opening your own business or developing something, you need to work with people who are also going to challenge your ideas. And that doesn't mean that you have to change them every time. It just means that you're not going in without having done a complete analysis of potential weaknesses or potential threats. Way back when we talked about SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, that's part of it. But doing it with people that you care about and that care about you means that you can trust them more. And it's not about tearing you down. It's about helping build you up. But sometimes that takes a difficult conversation. So
that's a really good point too, Tom. Putting our business hat on, we've had a lot of conversations about different business things, whether it's business ventures or policies or practices. And I think that the level of trust that we have makes it so much easier to have those business discussions, because I'm not worried about agendas or intent or anything like that. I know when I ask you a question that you are giving me the response that's based on, what's best for my family. And that's super important. Simple things like, I don't know, it was a couple of weeks ago, we were either at lunch or coffee or something. And I asked you just something silly as, do I need another LLC for the software company? And, for those of you who don't know, Tom is an MBA, and we'll talk about all of the different things that he's built, and just has a ton of knowledge, and gave me a quick response. And I didn't think twice about it. It was what he told me is what I did. So I think it's important to have a trusted confidant as you're growing your businesses. And sometimes you might be in a situation where you don't have that. And that's where you can jump into using a consultant. But a consultant won't replace a relationship like this, but it will provide you guidance. But when you're looking for a consultant, regardless of what area of discipline it might be, you got to make sure you vet that consultant, and talk about mission, vision, values, and reviews and past clients and things like that, because that's something that is super important, to have a like-minded consultancy firm.
Yeah. If you're going into 26 thinking that you're going to be an entrepreneur, you've already started the process and you've been listening, make sure you have a running buddy.
Yep. There you go. You said it in a sentence. Cool. Hey, so let's jump into kind of your journey. You've spent 30 years starting, building, and selling companies in healthcare, automotive, and now consulting with electric, automotive, senior care, injury prevention companies. Isn't it time to retire?
If I say yes, then guaranteed in 90 days, I'll figure out another way not to be retired. I feel like I'm wired for this. Number one, I feel like God's blessed me with the ability to do things in a way that help others. And it doesn't mean like I'm just this great person, but I am saying, first I was an occupational therapist. And when I was finishing up OT school, got my MBA. If you've listened to this podcast at the beginning, of our whole journey on the podcast, you'll know more about me. But I'm wired for building stuff. I've wanted to do and own my own business since I was a kid. No matter where I've ever worked, I've always looked at the position above me, not because I wasn't content, but I've always looked at the position above me and said, okay, how can I do that job? And I started doing it. And when I was 15 years old, I was a bag boy at Kroger's. And, I was looking at, well, how can I work in the produce department? So I went and talked to the manager. Fast forward to today, we had a very successful run in a healthcare practice that started off with two of us in an office, 350 square feet. 20 years later, Keith and I retired, 2,500 employees, 11 partners, multiple iterations of equity and venture equity. And I mean, it was such a blessing. And then we did the run with Grease Monkey. That was fantastic. Different model, different field. And what I come out with is that number one, there's consistency throughout the businesses. And two, for me, I need to be doing this just like other people may have a need. Maybe their passion is quilting. In fact, I know somebody whose wife is in the quilting world and is very successful as an entrepreneur. And I want to have them on the podcast. So teaser for the future. I hope they'll join us. But it's just something that I do. It's who I am. I don't care if I'm driving down a highway in Sheridan or a trip. If I see an empty building, an hour later, I've got a business plan for that place. And then I can dump it and I just keep going. But I really just enjoy it. And right after I finished and then I'll be quiet so we can talk about our new venture. But right after I finished with my healthcare practice, my business partner Keith Adams took me through a process called Purpose and Clarity. And what I came out on the other end of that with was that my focus for my future was going to be faith, family, friends, and finances. And what I realized, that just seemed like almost Sesame Street, like which one of these is not like the other, which one doesn't belong, kind of a thing. But what I've come to realize that I really enjoy helping my family and friends and the people that listen to our podcast. I enjoy helping them achieve levels of success that maybe they couldn't have achieved without some assistance. So that's why I do what I do. And no, it isn't time for me to retire. In fact, we're starting a new business. We've just started it in e-commerce.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. You've hinted about it. You've created a really cool Zoom background around it.
Thank you very much.
So isn't it just like a financial investment? Make a deposit and forget about it?
It's funny. So no, it is not, to be clear. It is not like a Sidewinder missile, fire and forget kind of a thing. It is not that. E-commerce has been around for a long time. And that's one of the things I like about it is that e-commerce is something that businesses engaged for many years. But for us, it's essentially retail online. If you go to a store, you go to a grocery store, you go to a mall, that's retail. Now, e-commerce is retail online. You can't hardly trip over anybody with that. They don't know Amazon, Walmart, they buy things online. I mean, that has just exploded. Hundreds of billions of dollars a year are spent on retail. And so that's what e-commerce is. It's not something new. It's not something magical. It's not the latest little lure for people to tap into financial stuff. It's business online. And so I think one of the things that I would like to dispel in people's minds that it's something, new and freaky. It's actually extremely stable. I don't know if that's why they called it Stable Storefronts, but it's a very stable industry and it is growing like crazy.
So, again, referencing your Stable Storefronts background, is that the company that you're working with? And if so, tell us a little bit more about it.
Yeah. So Stable Storefronts is a management company and we help people place create businesses to sell on different platforms. Amazon, Walmart, we've got our own proprietary platform that's coming out in 26. And when I say we, part of it is because I'm a storefront owner and I have engaged Stable Storefronts to manage my store. But another cool thing is that because of the relationship that we've developed, because they have just an insane culture that I absolutely adore, they've asked me to be a regional sales sales director, easy for me to say,
right?
Starting in January. So I'll actually be supporting storefront owners in 5 states starting in January. We can talk about that later on, but the organization is a management company. And what I look at is when I started Grease Monkey, and this isn't a knock, this is a typical franchise model. You pay an upfront franchise fee, and then you get processes. And so when I did that with Grease Monkey, I paid $45,000 upfront for my license, actually 3 licenses. And then I got a manual and a phone number to call, and they helped me through the process. But I did all the work. I did all the heavy lifting. I was the one doing the work 12 to 15 hours a day, emails. I had to build the building or I had to remodel a building. I did all of the work. So I paid $45,000 for the license, but I had to do all of the work. This model, it's not $45,000. It isn't that much, but you pay them to do all of the heavy lifting for you. And so they create your LLC, they get you your EIN, they get you your tax ID number. So you're actually creating a new LLC. Our LLC is actually called Legacy and Light Emporium. And that's something that our family created in terms of what we wanted to accomplish. It was kind of our family vision was create a legacy, be a light for the world. And we do that through retail. And so, like I said, our franchise model was one model. We're paying Stable Storefronts to set up and manage our store. And then later, we're going to put capital in it. When we did Grease Monkey, I had to build the Grease Monkey itself. We built a boutique in there, and it sat there with empty shelves. Sherry then had to go buy the product. And that's what Stable Storefronts does for us, is they set up our store and they stand there and wait to manage it for us until we put product in it. So we have a new LLC, and that's where we are.
You mentioned the family arrived at the name for the business. Talk me through what that process looks like involving family and business decisions like that.
Well, this is actually the first LLC that we've involved our children in. So they are 10% owners. Ashley owns 10%, Brandon owns 10%, Sherry and I own 80%. And we sat down with them and we said, look, we're looking at doing this business. It's something that we're praying about, but it truly will leave a legacy. This is something that as an LLC, you can take it over. You'll be part of it from the very beginning. And that conversation also, it wasn't just, what do we name it? It's like, what does this look like for you going forward? We didn't want our kids to be trust fund babies. We didn't want them to not have a sense of responsibility to their community. So the conversations that we're talking about is how do we utilize the revenue from this organization, from this business, and how do we give that back? How do we, we're going to tithe off of it, but how do we support different missions? And so each of our family members has to create their own thoughts about a mission they want to support. And we will do that through our organization. The process is, because of the way that Stable Storefronts does this, I don't have to manage it myself. I used to think that I was going to have to convert my garage into a warehouse. I thought e-commerce was, I have a garage and I convert it into a warehouse and I have to relabel stuff and I have to drop ship things. And, Sherry's going to make some candles and I'm going to do some widgets and we're going to sell those on Amazon. That is kind of and this isn't a knock, but that's kind of a mom and pop version. And that's a very small, isolated version of what you can do. Okay. But back in 2000, Jeff Bezos really, I think, pioneered this for people like us. In 2000, he went from a bookstore to essentially a consignment store. And so if you imagine, Jeff set up Amazon, Walmart now is on board and they're trucking along. They want to compete with the big boys. And right now there's just one, that's Amazon. But when Jeff did that, I say it like I know him. When Jeff Bezos did that, he opened up Amazon to people like us. I don't think that people quite understand, but about 70% of what's sold on Amazon and other platforms, even like with Walmart, I don't know the percentage specifically, but almost 70% on Amazon is actually product that's carried by people like us. It's storefront owners. And it's not ones and twos and threes and 10 items. It's actually providing the capital for them putting the product into the fulfillment centers so that you can say, I want this tomorrow, and it shows up on your doorstep tomorrow. So I think that's the thing. It's not new. And that's what I like about it. Truly, while the name is Stable Storefronts, I like the fact that this is stable. I'm very skeptical about things that are the latest, greatest. You got to get on it, hurry, get this. I've never bought things on an impulse like that. Well, that's not true. Maybe a car or two, but I've never been one of those people that gets pressured into, you got to do it today or you can't have it. And so it's actually very predictable. E-commerce is very predictable. I can tell you right now, global logistics, AWS for Amazon, their logistics is absolutely incredible. They know the buying habits of people in their community, and they're stocking those things in their fulfillment centers close to your house because they know what's going to be bought in that community. And when they publish that data, we actually acquire that data, we buy that data, and then my Stable Storefront representative, I have an account manager. Remember, all I have to do is let them manage the store. I don't even have to answer my own email if I don't want to. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm not in control of anything, but I'll use the term, I delegate that control to them to manage it for me. At Grease Monkey, and they're not a franchise. The Stable Storefronts is not a franchise. I want to be clear about that, but mentally, I want people to think about this. When I owned a franchise, I had to do all the work. I had to be there 15, 16, 17 hours a day. I'm the one that had to take care of it when I was at home at night. Stable Storefronts manages all that for me as a professional organization, and that's what I pay them to do up front. And then I bring my capital and I buy product. And they're the ones that have all the data. They're scrubbing about 15,000 SKUs per week. And I could never do that. And there are some people that have done their own work on Amazon, other platforms, and have been very successful. But I can tell you, they did a lot of work for it. And I like the fact that I'm having somebody else that's doing all that work and doing all the heavy lifting. I could do it myself, but I like the analogy that we often use. There's a picture, you always see pictures of people up at the top of Mount Everest, and they're smiling and everything. But behind those pictures are Sherpas. They're the ones that carried the tents. They carried the food. I mean, we're standing there taking the selfie on top. Now I won't be on Mount Everest, but they're taking the picture. But it was the Sherpas that did all the heavy lifting behind the scenes. That's what Stable Storefronts does for their storefront owners. They do all the heavy lifting. So they take care of the processes, all of the onboarding, the ungating, the relationship development with Amazon, and that's all critical. A relationship with Amazon is interesting. I say that ungating is dating. So there's a term that they use called ungating. When you start working with Amazon, when we start, and I've just started this process, we've been ungated and we've been gone through the Amazon onboarding process, which is 90 days, and we're going to start selling on the platform in January. But Amazon kind of starts like this, with their arms around you. Okay. Now, if you're dating my daughter, you better not have your arms around her the first night. Okay. But that said, the ungating process is just that. It's a process that occurs over time. But what happens is you have to start a relationship. Amazon is fantastic at ensuring that they don't have knockoffs and things being sold on the store, so that you have legitimate product that's actual product being sold on Amazon. And so it starts off slowly, and you have to develop a trust with Amazon. We talked about trust earlier. No different. They have to know that you are who you say you are, that you're going to keep your stores full, your shelves full. So if you go back to my analogy, imagine Stable Storefronts built the store for us, and we've got shelves. One shelf is Amazon, one shelf is Walmart, one shelf is our upcoming proprietary platform. And Amazon says, so here's your shelf, here's your virtual shelf, and we're going to limit the amount of product that you carry so that we know that you're going to meet the needs of our clients. It's not going to get returned. We want to know that you're going to keep your shelf full. And I saw that working in retail stores for 20 years as a consultant. We worked in many grocery stores. You just don't walk into a grocery store and say, I want a shelf. And they'll say, we'll give you a part of a shelf. Right. And if that product sells, then we're going to give you more space and more space. And then we might give you an end cap. So, for us with Stable Storefronts, that's what they're doing for us. They build and manage the store for us. And then we use our capital to buy product.
One of the things you mentioned was logistics. And when I think of logistics, and I've actually dug into both of these companies to understand kind of the processes, but Amazon, Walmart, and probably the United States military are the three most amazing logistics distribution networks out there. And with Amazon specifically, getting product to the customer, they do an amazing job. I mean, we live just north of San Antonio, Texas, and I can say, hey, I'm out of printer toner and it can be here this afternoon. So that just blows me away. But the other side of the coin is the returns. I'm just amazed at the process that they have for returns. I mean, it's just a really good customer experience all the way around.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we have to do as a storefront owner is we have to help Amazon meet that demand. Number one, from a product standpoint, but also from a service standpoint. They do not like returns. So if it's something that we've done wrong, we'll actually get penalized in our relationship with them. There's an ongoing internal number a number that you can look at in terms of your relationship with Amazon. So you're constantly being rated on the success that you have with your clients.
Social scoring. It's here.
It's I would call it service scoring, and not because I'm not trying to be politically correct. I'm saying that it's based on just a couple of factors, but it's based on your ability to meet the demand and to do that without paying for the customer. And so, that's what I love about it. And, going back to the kind of the process. So we pay Stable Storefronts an upfront fee. They get everything set up for us. Our tax ID, our EIN, operating agreement, you name it. They set everything up for us. And like I said, we fund product. And in order for that product to reach that platform, in order for it to get to the fulfillment center, we have to have that shipped to our US based warehouse in New Jersey. The guys in New Jersey at Stable Storefronts, they break everything down, they repalletize it, they relabel it. Amazon uses their own tape, their own labels. And so they do all of that for me. It doesn't get shipped to my garage. I never get one thing packaged, sent to me where I've got to do anything with it. And then they ship it out to the fulfillment center. So I may buy 100 widgets. They go to New Jersey, they get repackaged, and 10 might go to a fulfillment center in one state. 40 might go to a fulfillment in another state. The other 50 could be spread out 2 or 3 other fulfillment centers. And those could have all been your toner for your printer. And that's because Amazon knows we need, based on something very predictable, we need 10 of those toners in this fulfillment center because tomorrow, on average, there's going to be a number of people that are going to buy those toners within the next 90 days, and they're going to have to come out of that fulfillment center. And so that's the thing, is it's all very statistically based. It's very clear, objective, no magic. And relative to other things that I do, it's very low risk. I'm invested in stocks, typical stock market types of stuff. I've got real estate investments. I invest in some real estate syndicates where we pool buying power and buy mobile home parks. But relative to everything that I've done, this is the least risky because it is very predictable. You hear that word a lot. So yeah.
And the upside is pretty amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's the thing is that, you look at from a financial standpoint, one of the first question you ask is it a financial investment? And yeah, any business is a financial investment, but not in the traditional sense. It's not something where I give it to my financial advisor and they invest in stocks and bonds and, IRAs, et cetera. This is a financial investment. But when you look at the ROI, right now they're averaging about a 15.2% return on inventory turn. And they're turning their inventory 3 times a year, sometimes 4. So that 15.2% with the money that I invest in product is turning 3 times a year. So I'm saying at a 15.2% return, net on inventory turn, when I turn that 3 times, that's a 45% return on my money per annum. Like nothing else is doing that.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And it can be better than that depending on how many different platforms you are. And that's what Stable Storefronts does. They set up and manage the relationships in multiple platforms. And then they provide me really good data to help me make really good buying decisions. In fact, my account advisor walks through and says, okay, Tom, here's what you've been released to sell on these different platforms. Here's the product amount that's needed. And here's what the expected ROI is on each product. And then I get to select. And it couldn't be more easier. It couldn't be easier. And it works fantastic. And it literally takes me a couple of hours a month if I think about the different communications that I'll have with them and then actually sitting down with my account advisor. So as long as I follow what they're saying, I'm going to be dead on, but I can make my own decisions too. It's my LLC.
Isn't that kind of amazing? You just said, as long as I follow what they tell me, I'll be successful. And that's kind of, one of the things that we preach.
Exactly. I know. It's like, why reinvent the wheel when the wheel is working perfectly fine? I don't need to chip away at it.
Yeah. So Tom, tell me about, your customer, your audience, your avatar. Who is the person that's most likely to engage in Stable Storefronts?
It's not for people that want money today. So it is not a get rich quick thing. That I'm not into those. Typically get rich quick schemes are get poor fast schemes. And so I don't like those. They're high risk and I'm not going to spend what you recognize as a very long career in entrepreneurialism, making all the sacrifices so that I can lose money. The answer to your question is So it is not for people who think that they can put money into inventory and the next month start living off that money. It's going to take a couple of years of churn before you can really start to kind of pull some money out. And that's what I would recommend, depending on how much you're putting in. It's typically somebody who has, maybe you've got money that you would put into an IRA normally, but you want to do something that's going to build a wealth population, a legacy, kind of a wealth trail, generational wealth, or long-term opportunities for yourself. And you're going to do that over time. And so instead of putting it into an IRA, you might use that to fund your inventory. And so, like I said, if there's questions, I'll give you information about how to get a hold of me at the end, but you start your relationship through Stable Storefronts. They manage that relationship, and then you'll use a different sum of money to buy product. And that's going to be based on what is appropriate for you and your budget. But the ideal person is going to be someone with that kind of investable cash that can make good decisions. They don't need it today. I wouldn't take money out of your child's college fund if they're going to school in a couple of years and they need that, or you need that for them. Definitely don't take it out of your daughter's wedding fund unless she's like 2 years old. Then she's going to have a heck of a wedding if you do it now. But yeah, I think you have to have an entrepreneurial spirit. You have to be patient, let the process work. These people know what they're doing. And to our earlier conversation about trust, people that I trust and everything that I was promised has come to fruition. Even the patient part where they say, hey, the first several months is just, you got to be patient. It's a grind. We're building relationships. And all of that is exactly as they said it was going to be. And so I would say, the person who's entrepreneurially minded with some not disposable income in terms of you can waste it, but some investable income where you'd like to see that grow and see that accelerate pretty rapidly over time.
Yeah, probably like any investment, it's the money that you can afford to lose, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Cool. All
but
right.
Don't want to.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
With this investment, you more likely won't lose your money, but
Yeah.
I guess the end of the day, you don't want to invest the money that you got to feed the family on for the next week.
No. And I think the other thing that for me is I've invested in a culture too that I absolutely believe strongly in. The people there and now being able to be part of that culture truly are amazing. They absolutely live out the servant leadership mantra that they espouse. I've never seen an organization where people were so happy to work so hard. And at any given time, I can contact my account manager and they're taking care of business for me. And that's the other thing is for the people that might be interested, if you want to go sit on a beach somewhere and know that your store is being well handled, and then hop on a call from your hotel room and make some order selections and then go back to spending time with your family, like this is for you.
I think that's awesome. And we talk about it a lot on our podcast, but you really, bring this to life, the culture piece. And I know the answer to this question, but to what degree is culture the predictor of success, whether it's an investment or a business or a product?
Success is defined a lot of different ways, but I think that having a solid culture is a major predictor of success, and that success may come through difficult times. So I want to be very clear. Success isn't, everything's coming up roses from the very beginning. You've got a garden, you've got to churn the soil, you've got to work hard, you've got to weed. But if you have an excellent culture that's rooted in servant leadership, as far as I'm concerned, that means you're serving your people, you're serving your population of people that you're wanting to sell to, then you are going to have a successful business. I don't care if you're selling hamburgers or healthcare services, or you're doing things with Stable Storefronts. I think culture drives it. Was it Drucker that said culture eats strategy for breakfast?
Yeah, I think so.
It's absolutely true. And I saw that with our last practice, our healthcare practice, when we went through the COVID era, and they came out on the other side very successful. And I think I know for a fact it had to do with the culture, because everybody, when the chips were down, everybody said, we're going shoulder to shoulder. We're going to get through this. And then the ongoing living it on a daily basis where you see people caring about each other.
I love that.
Yeah.
So, Tom, as we bring this episode to a close, people who are interested in learning more about Stable Storefronts or Tobin Team Consulting or any of the ventures that you've got going on, how can they get in contact with you?
Yeah, so they can reach me either at tom.tobinteam@gmail.com, and that's just tom, tom.tobinteam@gmail.com, or call me at 210-706-0005. So 210-706-0005. And if you're interested in learning more about Stable Storefronts, I'd be happy to hop on a Zoom with you, walk you through what that looks like. And then, if I don't think that it's going to work for you, I'll tell you. We have no desire to bring people in and not have them be successful. And we have quarterly meetings where they actually mingle existing storefront owners and people who are looking at becoming a storefront owner. And you don't do that if you're not having good success. You don't want those people together.
Yeah. I love that. That's fantastic. Well, Tom, I am so excited about this next venture. And I know that it's going to be a successful one, and excited that the kids are involved in this one. And for our audience, I mean, this is just another example of, following our path, our checklist, our getting started, things that we've preached over the last several episodes. So with that, Christmas is in a couple of days. We wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and all of the other holidays, Happy Hanukkah, anything else you may celebrate. And this is it for Two Guys on Stuff, and we'll see you next week.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Thanks for listening to Two Guys on Stuff. Tune in next week as Tom and Michael talk more about leadership stuff, life stuff, helpful stuff, and maybe even your stuff. Until then, keep your stories fun.